Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hopefully, everyone's having a good end of the weekend. Hopefully, everyone had a good week, and you all are staying safe and all that kind of good stuff. I want to make a quick video dealing with ASVAB. I got a question in one of the comments based on one of the videos I did before that kind of has some questions about the ASVAB. So I just want to kind of quickly go through it, and hopefully it'll be informative and help anybody who watches this on their journey to join whatever military branch that you are that you're aspiring to join. So as the title talks about says, we're going to be talking about the ASVAB. The ASVAB is a test that anyone looking to join a military branch, whether it be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and now Space Force, will have to take in order to join that military branch. Essentially, it's a test that's designed to measure your aptitude for different things, much like the SAT on the ACT when I was younger. Much like those tests are used for colleges and universities to determine your aptitude and acceptability into their institutions. The ASVAB is used for that. Now, it doesn't mean that if you score low in the ASVAB that you can't get into any military branch. That does mean that there may be a military branch like the Air Force that has a higher requirement for the ASVAB that you may not be able to get into. But let's say for the Army, having a low ASVAB score doesn't mean you can't join the Army, but it does mean that you don't have the option to have certain MOSs. And no, MOSs are essentially the job that you have when you're inside your military branch. So it's kind of a big deal. You want to score as high as possible, so that way you have as many options for as your military job to choose from. So let's kind of get into it. Let me just kind of show you guys. I'm going to share my screen here. I want to show you guys essentially the different sections of the ASVAB, so that way you kind of know what you're studying for. So we're going to go here. And we'll go to the fact sheet. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing this. So what you see in front of you are the different sections to the ASVAB. So you have general science, arithmetic, reasoning, word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, mathematics knowledge, electronics information, auto information, shop information, mechanical comprehension, and assembly objects. You will have a certain amount of time. If I'm not mistaken, I have to go back and actually look this up. I didn't see it, but I think that when I did the ASVAB, I think I had a total of 3 hours to do it, if I'm not mistaken, to get through all these sections. I believe it's like 2 or 3 hours. As you're going through the different sections, you don't have to stop and wait for everyone else to finish before you move on to the next section. If you finish a section earlier than you thought you were, you're free to continue to move on through the test and get as many of these things done as possible within the allotted time. So general science is essentially what it says. It is going to give you some basic information or basic questions based on what you should have learned in high school and in middle school. So the description says that it's a knowledge of physical and biological sciences. So again, some things that you should have been exposed to in middle school as well as in high school. So a lot of times when we're going through high school, oftentimes I should say, we look at our classes and we think like, when will we ever need this, right? Like, no, I don't plan on being a scientist, so why would I need this science class? Or I don't plan on being a rocket scientist or a math genius, so why do I need all these different classes? But this right here shows you the importance of having, at least paying attention and learning the information from these classes, because they're going to show up regardless of whether you're going to be in a STEM field or not in the military. Your passage into the military and the determining factor of the options that you'll have as far as MOSs goes right through math, science, writing, reading, and some other things. So those classes that you're taking in high school are extremely important. So please, if you're a high school student watching this, please make sure you're paying attention to those classes that you're taking. If you are like myself, who have already gone through those classes, and maybe you didn't take them as as serious as you were supposed to, again, make sure you bone up on that stuff. All right, so the next thing you have is arithmetic reasoning, the ability to solve arithmetic word problems. For myself, coming up through school, I hated word problems just because it was hard for me sometimes to visualize the problem and to come up with the right equation. So make sure you're studying those things. Word knowledge, ability to select the correct meaning of a word presented in context and to identify best synonym for a given word. So again, you want to be able to understand what a word means in context and then come up with a word that sounds different but means the same thing, right? Sounds different but means the same thing. Paragraph comprehension. Can you read a paragraph and then from that derive the meaning from that paragraph? What is the author actually saying? So when you're going through your classes, your English classes, and they're talking to you about making inferences and paraphrasing and summarizing, that skill set comes in handy here. Mathematics knowledge of high school mathematics principles. Again, going back to your high school years, algebra and geometry. I think it's mostly algebra, geometry. I don't think any trig shows up on the ASVAB, but definitely algebra and geometry. I remember having to study for a very long time the different formulas because you weren't sure which ones were going to show up or which ones were going to be needed. So again, make sure you're paying attention to those things. Electronics information, knowledge of electricity and electronics. Now this one, again, if you're not a technical person, if you don't really have any experience working on this kind of stuff, it's going to be a little difficult. But the ASVAB book, the ASVAB for Dummies book that I used, that's still in publication. And I think there's some other ASVAB study guides out there. They will give you very helpful information to give you some basic knowledge, so that way you can be prepared just in case you see some similar scenarios on the test. Auto information, knowledge of automobile technology. Again, that's something if you don't have prior knowledge of or prior experience with, those books will come in handy. Shop information, knowledge of tools and shop terminology and practices. Again, for those of you who may want to go into an MOS that deals with vehicles, military vehicles, and being a mechanic and things of that nature, here's one that you want to pay attention to. But even if you don't, again, the score from this section gets added up to your overall section, which determines what options you have available. Mechanical comprehension, so knowledge of mechanical and physical principles. And then lastly, assembling objects. So the ability to determine how an object will look when its parts are put together. This one to me was probably the most problematic because when I was doing the practice test, I always did very well on this section, but I never could tell anyone why I did well. I would go through the practice test and I'll make my selections. And to me, I had no idea what I was doing. And then when I would get to the end of the test, lo and behold, I would have a good score. So out of 10, I may get 8 or 9 correct. And I never could understand what exactly I was doing right or how I got the one wrong. It never really made any sense to me. But again, you want to study this section because you never know. Now, on the ASVAB, the actual official ASVAB test that I took, I don't remember having too many problems or too many. Yeah, I don't remember having too many questions that really were aimed towards assembling objects. But it's still something that you want to pay attention to because you just never know what version of the ASVAB test that you're going to get. So these are the sections of the ASVAB test. Here, I have actually, this is an example book. So 2019 to 2020 ASVAB for Dummies. You get paperback for $11.72. Or like I said, if you have an iPhone, iPad, then you can download the ASVAB for Dummies app and kind of take it wherever you want to go and just do the practice test over and over and over and over again. So that's very important. Very important. So let's kind of get into my tips with this. So here's the advice that I have for that. So number one, you want to make sure that you are studying often, like study as much as possible. Particularly if you're a person who has not been in school for a long time. Again, for those that don't know my story, I joined the Army National Guard when I was 34. I enlisted in the Army National Guard at 34. I'm now in the Army Reserves. But at 34, I joined, which means that I graduated high school. What is that? That's almost 14. That's like 14 years, or maybe close to 16 years, really. 16 years after high school. So I graduated high school in 1999. And so it had been a very long time since I studied any of that stuff for any purpose outside of the writing, because I was an English teacher. But everything else it had been so long since I studied. And in high school, I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff anyway. I thought I would never need it again, thought I would never see it again. And I was wrong, obviously. So study often. I would spend, maybe two hours studying, just going through 2 or 3 hours, just studying, doing practice problems. I would also use outside information from the ASVAB for Dummies book. I went out and found some videos on YouTube about that dealt with algebra and geometry, because math had always been my weakest subject. It was a subject that I never did like. So I spent extra time doing the math, doing like math work and math practices outside of the ASVAB for Dummies book. So make sure you're spending as much time as possible studying it, as well as doing the practice test. Great thing about the app is if you don't do well on the practice test, you can always do the practice test again. You don't have to worry about paper and all that kind of good stuff. The second thing that you need to also make sure you do, take the test when you feel like you're ready. When you're dealing with recruiters, you have to remember that recruiters' job is to get you from being a civilian to enlisting in the Army. That's their job. If they can get you enlisted on Monday, they will get you enlisted on Monday. They want to get you enlisted as soon as possible. You, though, at that point, you still have control over your career and control over what your next steps are. They're going to pressure you to take the ASVAB soon, and you have to be able to say, I need a few weeks or I need a few months before I take this. So when I was enlisting, I did a practice ASVAB with my recruiter. Horrible, particularly on the math, right? And so I said, well, I'm going to need a few weeks really to study hard and to nail this math part down, so that way I can make sure my score is high enough. And so my recruiter ended up giving me, I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I think it was about 4 weeks. So 4 weeks out from that time, he scheduled the ASVAB. So I had 4 weeks to just study pretty much daily, get that stuff under my belt. So that way, when I took the test, I would feel a lot more comfortable taking that test. So please make sure that you don't take that test until you're absolutely ready. Don't let anybody pressure you into taking it before you think you're ready. That's recruiters, that's family, that's friends, whatever. Because ultimately, this test is going to decide for you what MOSs are available to you. And then lastly, don't settle for your first score if you're not satisfied with it. So even after you take the ASVAB, you are still not bound to that military branch. You are still not bound. You haven't signed anything. You haven't signed a contract or anything. So up to that point, you're still good. You still are in control of the situation. The recruiter wants to get you enlisted because they need that credit, and that helps out with their job security and all that kind of good stuff. But for you need to make sure that you are making the decision that's going to be best for you and your career. That's going to be best for you and your future. Getting the proper MOS, or at least getting an MOS that you want, is a good first step. A lot of soldiers, and I probably would say this for other branches as well, come into the military, and a lot of them don't get the branch that they want, and they're very dissatisfied once they are trained and end up in the branch having to do that job. And then they kind of spend the rest of their time trying to get out of that job by retaking the ASVAB and all that kind of good stuff. So make sure that at this point, you're still in charge. You're still the one that's dictating your next movement. Make sure that if you take that test and you get the score back and it's low, or it's lower than what you wanted, and it doesn't give you the option to have the MOS that you want, take it again. They can't stop you from taking it again. Even if that recruiter specifically tries to give you a hard time or doesn't want to work with you anymore, that's fine. There's another recruiter who wants to get someone enlisted who will work with you. So study often, take the test when you feel like you're ready to take the test. And then if you get a score that you don't like, then by all means, don't settle for that score and just take whatever options they give you. You want to make sure that you get the score you want, so that way you can get the MOS that you want. Obviously, that's going to be different for different branches. In the Army, you get to choose your MOS based on what's available. So a higher ASVAB score pretty much opens the book to you. And if it's available, you can go get it. I think for the Marines, I think your MOS is chosen for you by the Marines. However, it's chosen for you based on the ASVAB and the Marines needs. So again, if you're going to join a branch that doesn't allow you to choose your MOS, but they choose it for you, what you don't want to do is go into that branch scoring low on the MOS, because they're going to just throw you wherever at that point. You want to go in scoring high on the ASVAB, so that way you have the option, you have the opportunity, I should say. There's a better chance that they'll put you in a better MOS, or at least in an MOS that's more satisfying for your career long term. So with that being said, hope you guys again have a great weekend. Join me again every Sunday. I try to do 7:30. Sometimes life gets in the way, but join me every Sunday, 7:30 p.m. And if you have any comments, please leave them down in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the page. I read all the comments. I try to read most of the comments. Sometimes I may miss some, but I will respond to your comments. If you have any suggestions or any topics that you want me to talk about, I'll more than happy to talk about those. Again, things that I don't talk about, I do not talk about what goes into Army training, so as far as schools and tactical stuff. I don't talk about that kind of stuff, and I don't really talk about my MOS specifically. So anything outside of those two things, we're good. All right, so you guys be blessed. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys in 7 more days. All right, take care.